of questions about his team. The Miami Dolphins, they might be speedy, but they are going nowhere fast. I have never felt so like every word that Mike McDaniel spoke in the presser there, it lacked the gravity because even I could tell, as somebody that doesn't even cover them on a day-to-day basis, he's making up word salad right now because he's trying to find ways to excuse the inability for what I believe this Miami Dolphins team expects itself to be versus what they actually have been over the past couple of years. And I say they're going nowhere fast specifically because when you have a culture as a football team, it is generally driven by either your quarterback or your best player. And those two guys for the Dolphins right now, C-Cat, are major question marks. Number one, you got Tyreek Hill, who is tweeting a storm out of peace fingers and quote tweeting rumors about him being optional to be traded and whatnot. He obviously has an issue going on with his wrist, and Mike McDaniel was very evasive about the questions regarding whether or not he'll be ready by the time of the start of camp. He said they're going to be patient. But on top of all of that, we're talking about a guy that was not just the best player on your team last year. He was ranked number 1 in the NFL 100 over Patrick Mahomes. Now, I know that was a bit, like we took that with a grain of salt, but still it speaks to how highly his peers in the NFL think of him as a player, as a performer. When your number 1 guy, since literally their season ended and through this offseason has been flirting with the idea of whether or not he wants to be a Miami Dolphin, whether or not rumors are true that the Dolphins are seeking to trade him, and whether or not he's totally bought in on football, though you just renegotiated his contract and are paying him through the roof. That is an issue. And C-Cat, it's even more of an issue when for the first 15 minutes or so of Mike McDaniel's media availability, it only ran about 30 minutes. We have the full thing on our YouTube at ESPN West Palm. The dude spent like the first 15 minutes specifically just fielding questions about Tyreek Hill. Like, that's got to be driving him insane.
Yes.
A guy that's trying to get this team together, that offense together, he's trying to make sure that they can cultivate a winning experience, break the playoff win drought, and you got to spend 15 minutes talking about this dude that you're paying the most amount of money on your team because he's being a knucklehead on social media? Like, damn.
Yes, when you expend that amount of money and dedicate that amount of resources to that position, wide receiver, you have to at least expect it to not cause you problems. It's like buying a car for $75,000. And maybe in your life, in your past life, you only went on Facebook Marketplace and you got a clunker and saved some money. And you know what? This time you said, you know what? I'm not going to spare any cost. I'm going to buy my security. I'm going to get a brand new car. Well, at least will save me all these trips to the car shop that I used to be going to. And now that $75,000 car you bought brand new, you're going back to the shop for. It's still not a sure thing, and you can't explain it why other than egos and big personalities.
And on top of that, the issues that you're having with this car just so happen to not be under warranty. just so happen to be issues that are not, when you sat down and the salesman was trying to upsell you on these things, you're like, I don't know if we necessarily need that, and I think I could go without that. Those are the exact things that are going wrong with a guy like Tyreek Hill, who I enjoy watching play football. As a Chiefs fan and as a guy that did a lot for Kansas City, as a guy that was electric for the Dolphins for a couple of years there, I like it. The NFL is better, and the Dolphins are more enjoyable when he's flying down the field, throwing up the deuces as he's scoring touchdowns, not when he's tweeting out the deuces in regards to rumors about whether or not he's going to be wearing a Dolphins uniform next year. I just feel like Dolphins fans have suffered enough already, and for Tyreek Hill, it's a guy I wish the best for. I hope his heart is genuine in all of this. It feels like he's playing with the feelings of these Dolphins fans who are hopeless, who are aimless, and they're going into next season seemingly rooting for a team that is going absolutely nowhere fast. If you look at the AFC East right now, and you look at the quarterback situations, the Dolphins are either third or fourth place, depending on how you feel about Justin Fields as a prospect to get better and or how you feel about Tua Tagovailoa's contract and the fact that the Dolphins are stuck with him, whereas Fields can be let go of next year at little to no cost. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, just in their division, I'm not talking about the NFL, the defensive side of the ball, you're like, well, you have a great DC in Anthony Weaver. and you have faith that he's going to be one of those guys, likely a potential head coaching candidate down the line. But, I mean, there's questions at corner opposite Jalen Ramsey. You don't know what the Dolphins are necessarily going to do with the 13th pick in the draft because they have so many options of vacancies they can fill. And you would hope that when you spend that much money, right, C-Cat? Like, if you're spending that amount of money on offense between the quarterbacks, the receivers, and whatnot, like, and even at tackle, right? We got to see what they do with Armstead and whatnot. When you're spending that level of money on offense, you would hope that when you have a top 15 pick, you can use that asset on defense. But that's not even entirely true because they might have to shore up the offensive line as well. Like, so many question marks for a team whose goal is to win a playoff game. But I think even the ceiling of this Dolphins team this year, I would be barely taking them to have a winning season.
Yeah, it's just a flimsy foundation. Like, they're building this team on speed and athleticism on the outside with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But those foundational pieces and your quarterback, who got the biggest deal in Dolphins history, Tua Tagovailoa, for different reasons, not ego clashing and not big personality disorders. Yeah. No, it's just happened to be a guy who can't stay healthy. It's such a flimsy foundation that you can't count on anything within that organization with the Dolphins right now.
I'm just nervous, man. I'm nervous for what this season entails. I'm curious as to how desperate the Dolphins organization is going to actually act. What I will give them credit for is, in the midst of this storm and in the midst of all of the indecision and the vulnerability at major positions that they have, it does feel like they have not acted like a team like the Cleveland Browns or even the New York Jets at times, and like how I feel like the Giants are going to be acting this offseason when you have a head coach and a GM on the hot seat. They're not acting erratically. They're not spending in like an inconsistent or a desperate manner. It feels like they're trying to make smart and savvy decisions, and it feels like a team that should still be on the trajectory upward. I don't even think firing Mike McDaniel's the option. I think he's the right coach. I don't even think getting off of Tua necessarily is the option. I feel like he's a good enough quarterback that should be able to win you a playoff game, at least a playoff game in a season. But something ain't right there, man. Like, between the culture, the locker room, the fact that other players, when they leave your team, they're saying that you're weak-minded and that you are not a team that stands tall in the face of adversity but withers when times get tough. Like, and then we watch it play out on the field. It just is, again, as I listen for those 30 minutes, and if you want to listen to the full Mike McDaniel interview, it's on our YouTube at ESPN West Palm. As I listen for those 30 minutes, it makes sense as to why this team is going nowhere fast. And one of the saving graces, one of the moves that I did like the Dolphins made this offseason, you talked about Tua's fragility, they went out and got Zach Wilson. And Mike McDaniel spoke specifically to the commonality between Tua and Zach Wilson, and it's not in play style. It's also not necessarily in the trajectory of their careers. But he talked about how he feels like this coaching staff and this environment, as it is both the perfect place for Tua to thrive. He says that what he reads from Zach Wilson's from his personality, from his demeanor and whatnot, he feels like the Dolphins locker room is the perfect place for a guy like that to thrive, which I can buy into. But again, if we're buying into Zach Wilson in the year of 2025, and that is your saving grace behind Tua Tagovailoa because you couldn't find another veteran backup or you didn't have any other safeguards, like, I'm looking at your division, I'm looking at the AFC in general, and I'm just like, where are we going?
Yeah, it's almost like an anomaly as to why this is not going this well. Is it just because this is a people business as much as it is a football business? And the people that happen to be wearing the Dolphins uniforms, they got unlucky, where all of a sudden this chemistry quite isn't there? Because you kind of look at I might be way off base here, but with a couple of variables, you see a different result with the Minnesota Vikings. You see a wide receiver core that is locked down solid. You know for a fact that will not be a weak spot on the team.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of instability at quarterback, and that team won 14 games last year.
Crazy.
And listen, you can talk about it. You can go ad nauseum about how great of a coaching staff they do have in Minnesota and why that is a key component as to why they are winning these games, maybe outkicking their coverage in terms of succeeding as much as they did in that tough division last year. But what's different between Miami and Minnesota apart from just one has a better defense? Winning culture?
Winning
like, is it that
culture.
ghost that you chase and have to accomplish?
Because we say